Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week, I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today, I'm talking with Mark Penning. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you here. Tell me about your background and how you got where you are now.
Sure. I am born and raised in South Africa. I was lucky enough to be a kid in a country with fantastic wildlife and fantastic people. And so grew up just, understanding wildlife and how important it is for one's soul to spend time with nature. And as I grew up, I wanted to make a difference for animals and for wildlife. I apparently told my teacher way back in grade 2 that I would one day be a veterinarian and work with wildlife. And ultimately, that has come true.
Where were you a veterinarian and what happened after that?
I worked in South Africa, starting off in Pretoria, and subsequently moved down to Durban, which is down on the coast, quite a lot like Florida, actually, nice and warm, and a beautiful place, lots of wildlife in that area. But I was working. I found that saving animals one at a time was wonderful. It was fantastic, but I felt I wasn't going to change the world that way. There are just too many people and too many animals, right? So I thought, well, how do I save more animals and how do I reach more people all at the same time? And so my career kind of took me more towards looking after big collections of animals, rare parrots. You'll see these beautiful birds on my backdrop, things like that. And then snakes, believe it or not. I got a real love of snakes because everyone else was too scared to touch them. And of course, when a snake is not well, it needs help just as much as any dog or cat might. So I specialized in helping reptiles and birds. And from then it took me into what is essentially the zoo profession. So I was working a lot with collections of animals in a zoological setting and working with wild animals at the same time. And I found that the one really helped with the other and vice versa.
So, how did you get to the United States?
Aha, good question. So I actually was working in Durban running an organization that did a lot of marine scientific research. When a community living on the coast wants to catch fish for a livelihood, they should be able to do that. We want them to be able to harvest fish or lobsters or whatever the product might be from the sea, be able to eat it and be able to earn a livelihood from that, but in a sustainable way, right? So that they don't take too much, and so that their children and subsequent grandchildren can potentially do the same. And so Disney had an opportunity come up in the USA for me to lead their animal operations and science operations. And so I'm very lucky to have joined the Walt Disney Company and moved over to Orlando, Florida.
And what type of work do you do there?
I look after animals, that again from an animal care and well-being perspective, making sure that animals are doing the very best they can and that they're thriving, and then a lot of environment work, thinking of sustainability and how do we do our business in the most sustainable way possible. It's very exciting. It's wonderful. I'm very, very proud to be a part of such an amazing company.
What are your thoughts in general about zoos and what are the pros and cons of them?
I'm a firm believer that they have the potential to make an enormous difference. You could see animals in a book, you could see them on TV, but when you're up close to an animal and you have that connection, there is nothing on earth like it, at least not for me. And I think for millions of people, that connection is incredibly special. I think the concept of a zoo where we can take great care of animals and make very special connections for people is a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that all zoos are brilliant, because many are not. Okay. And I'm a firm believer in setting very high standards that they have to meet, to make sure that those animals are doing well.
Are zoos generally nonprofit or for profit?
It's a bit of both. For the most part, probably non-profit, because many of them are owned by a city or a state. But around the world, they tend to be more for-profit. But you may find, this will surprise you, the zoos and aquariums of this world put more money into conservation than any of the other conservation organizations out there. Any. Quite literally. What has happened is zoos have evolved from being, come and take a look at an interesting animal, to, we're here first and foremost to protect wildlife in the wild. In order to do that, we keep animals and we do it the best we can. And we're going to make sure that they thrive, but our ultimate goal is still to protect wildlife in the wild.
What about for-profit zoos? Do they also contribute to research?
Yes, very much so. Many of the really big zoos and aquariums around the world are for profit, and they end up contributing more to conservation than even the non-profit ones do, simply because they're just so big.
I always wonder, how are animals taken care of in the off season when nobody's at the zoo?
In a zoological collection or a park of some sort, you should try to have animals there that do well in that environment. So if you're a zoo up in the north of the USA where it gets really cold, then you should show animals that do well there. You should, the Amur tiger is one of the most impressive animals in the whole world, and it lives in the snow. So you could have it out there for people to see right through the year. And then there's no off season for the animal, right? The guests might not want to come in the middle of winter, but the tiger is very happy. And then you come to Florida, a place like Florida, it's much harder for something like that, right? It means then you've got to provide air-conditioned spaces and what have you, which is very expensive, and much more difficult.
We used to live in Switzerland, and there was a zoo
Ah,
with a lot of giraffes in
uh-huh.
the middle of Switzerland where it gets very
Yes,
cold in the winter.
that's different. Absolutely. And they're a lot like that, right? And I'm hoping they take really good care of them. I don't know about that, but it means providing the right kind of environment. And it goes back to, I said the word thrive, right? What we want to do as animal care professionals is look at each species and say, what do I need to see that shows me the animal is thriving, right? Some animals like to walk big distances. So am I actually seeing them walk big distances? Some need to swim. Am I giving them enough place to swim? And number two, that if it's in a group situation, that individual is thriving and not just the group. So, for example, is it perhaps being bullied by another animal and hiding out where it, doesn't necessarily want to be? Or is there somebody else who's getting all the food and this one's not getting enough? That kind of thing. And by attending to all of those things, yes, you can take great care of an animal in a different environment like that. You can. It's just harder and it's probably more expensive.
Do all zoos need to get a yearly inspection or report card?
In America, there is an organization called the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and that organization has written standards for zoos. So in order to be a member, an accredited member, you have to go through an inspection. And it's a really detailed, very thorough inspection that takes several days, where a team of experts looks at everything about your business. And if you comply with the standard, then you are an accredited member of the organization. Now, there are in the USA something like 2,500 entities that are licensed to display wildlife. About the top 10% of those are AZA accredited members. So that would show you that standard is pretty high. And so the best of them can achieve that standard. The rest, there are pathways to help them get better.
What about the rest of the world?
Some regions don't have these at all, and I'm very proud to be on the board of an organization called Wild Welfare, and what we do is help different regions of the world develop standards just like that. We have a team of folks that are in Brazil right now doing this work. We have a team that's going to be in Borneo just in a couple of weeks. I'm actually going to be along on that trip. And what we try to do there is help not just zoos, just think of how many, sanctuaries and rehabilitation centers there are. You look at, for example, in Asia, elephants, right? Elephants are used for transportation. They're used for work on farms. And when that elephant is aggressive, or the elephant is not training well, or somebody doesn't need it anymore, where does the poor thing go? It ends up at a sanctuary. And so we go around to different sanctuaries to help them, again, identify what do I need to see that this animal's thriving. So we're helping to develop those standards.
Where do most zoos get their animals?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Now again, I can't speak for zoos overall, right? But I can share with you how zoos that are good zoos and that are members of the AZA, as I told you, we will not generally take animals out of the wild. Okay, we have breeding programs where animal species are very carefully managed. We breed where there is a need, and we make sure that the responsible zoos and aquariums have got the animals that they need, right? The time that we will deviate from that is when the government asks us to. So I'll give you an example. There is a very dangerous disease condition impacting coral off the Florida coral reef tract. So, scientists raised a red flag and said, whoa, there's this major problem. We're seeing corals dying all the way along the Florida reef tract, and it's spreading. It's coming down south. Please help. So the management authority reached out to the zoos and aquariums and said, can you guys help? We said, yes, absolutely. So they went and collected the major coral specimens that they could find, as many as they possibly could. They took them out of the sea. They took a GPS location for every single one, took them out the sea and gave them to us. And we held them. We're holding them. Currently, the facility that I'm working with has got 800 plus corals at the moment that are doing beautifully, that are really growing. I mean, they probably doubled in size in the last year. So they're in great condition. They're looked after by great people. And we're holding them until the management authority says, okay, I think we figured this out now. We understand why it happened. We understand how it happened. And we think these corals are now okay to go back. And then all of them are going to go back to exactly where they were taken out of. So we have great partnerships with, Fish and Wildlife and other management agencies. That's really exciting. And that's another great example of how zoos and aquariums really are committed to protecting wildlife in the wild.
What about the supply chain for all the non-AZA facilities?
There is pretty good legislation in place to protect that wildlife, right? There is, if you want to move a bird or a snake or a gorilla from one country to another, there's a lot of legislation in place that protects those animals. So it's very hard to get something like that. However, there are still enough lions and tigers, for example, in the USA, in private hands, that truly, if somebody wanted to go and buy a tiger, they could probably do that in the USA. It's just one of those crazy things.
Let's talk about using animals for entertainment.
I like animals. When you do a game drive in Africa, it's very entertaining. You're watching animals and there's things going on and an experience. You come away and, oh man, that was incredible. When you go to a zoo, that's a good facility that does great experiences and looks after its animals. It's very entertaining. But the animals were kind of doing what they were doing. You didn't have them do things specifically just to entertain the people.
In the next 30 years, what do you think it'll look like for animals in zoos?
Well, I think what's most important is that the animals in the wild are under more and more and more pressure, right? So conservation is going to become more and more important. For me, that means the role of zoos and aquariums is going to get more and more important. Okay. At the same time, people are going to have less and less exposure to wildlife. So they're going to be relying on zoos and aquariums more and more because it's going to be so much harder to see any wildlife outside of a zoo and aquarium. That's just a very harsh reality. So I think what's going to happen at the same time is that the legislation protecting animals in zoos and making sure that they are well cared for is going to get better and better, which means that that bottom end of the scale is slowly going to be phased out. And I think just general care of animals like that is going to get better. But yes, I firmly believe that the role of zoos and aquariums in the next 30 years is going to double and triple in importance.
If I could wave my magic wand and give you 2 wishes, what would they be?
Awesome question. I firstly wish that people would appreciate the value of nature for what it is and not for what we can take out of it. That's number one. In other words, that people can recognize how important it is for us to just leave nature alone and let it be. And then secondly, that people would be able to coexist with each other without being silly, putting away political differences, and being able to focus on how to live a life that has a net positive impact on the environment in their home, in their office, and at work, and in their daily lives.
What about conservation? What would you like to see happen in the next 30 years?
I would love to see stronger and stronger legislation to protect the biodiversity hotspots as they are, right? I think it's too easy for people to say, we'll go in and clear this place and take out everything we need, and then we'll just rehabilitate it. It takes hundreds and hundreds of years to rehabilitate some of those really important forests, and I don't think you can do it in so many cases. And then secondly, I want to see people through organizations like zoos and aquariums, through the AZA, through conservation NGOs, all of us working so hard to protect wildlife. I'd like to see people start listening, start recognizing the value, and start feeling that it's okay to coexist with wildlife and not put a fence around a little piece of forest over there somewhere and say, that's the wildlife and everything else here can be concrete. We have to learn how to live together with wildlife.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about wildlife?
That's a good question. I think too many people believe that we can live on this planet without wildlife and that wildlife doesn't matter. For me, that is just a really tragic situation. We must have, in order for us to be healthy and to have healthy communities, we need a healthy planet. And for a healthy planet, we need healthy ecosystems. And so wildlife and their ecosystems are the basis of life on Earth. If we carry on doing what we're doing and we keep on destroying the natural world around us, we're breaking our own life support system, right? And that's just silly, isn't it?
Now, my final and most important question. How can kids help?
Oh, lovely question. So, what kids can do is most importantly knowledge, right? Just build your knowledge base. You've got a cell phone in your hands, which is the most powerful device ever invented. It's got every bit of knowledge that mankind has dreamed up right there at the press of a button. So there's no excuse for ignorance anymore, right? So use it responsibly, use it to learn. Go to places and see them. We talked earlier about zoos. If you want to just accept a whole lot of opinions from people on a chat group, and that forms your opinion, well, I think you're missing out. Go and see a dolphin show and make up your mind. Be critical. Go and see it carefully, and then you make up your mind. Talk to the right people, or you choose an environmental project to support. The Lion Recovery Fund, or the International Rhino Foundation, or the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. You choose one of those to support as an individual, but then learn more about it and learn how to set up a group that can support it. And it just builds up slowly but surely. It builds up into something meaningful, But as a group of kids, you won't believe how much you can achieve if you have a very clear goal and a group of motivated people. You can change the world.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Nature's Guardians.
Thank you.